Okay, up to this point, we have really been straddling the boundary between personal finance and corporate finance in this class. And, we've been looking at bonds and stocks and all the things that corporations do for financing themselves, right? For paying for their investments. But we've been pretty much looking at them from a personal financial management perspective. Even though this book and sort of the title of the course is about financial management, I've deliberately kept the focus on the kinds of things that you all, as individual investors, would probably be interested in learning about. So at this point, though, we are heavily now into the world of corporate finance, right? So we got to put on our financial manager's hat and think of ourselves as, working within a corporate finance role. And in addition to coming up with the money to pay for investments, an important aspect of the corporate finance role is evaluating investments and determining, in a world of limited resources, what is the best use of the capital that they come up with. Okay. And so I kind of want to put this in context, both in this class and the material that we've done thus far in this class, and also in your prior classes in the finance and accounting world at Keene State. Okay, so if you remember back to managerial accounting, one of the final modules in that class was about tactical decision making. Remember, it was make or buy or outsource. What should I do now or in the next year that is the best use of resources for the company? And the difference between tactical decision making and strategic decision making is the time horizon and the question of the long run. Because tactical decision making assumes that your fixed expenses are fixed, and that your capital equipment that's available is fixed. When you look at finance, part of the role of corporate finance is determining how to grow your capital equipment base, how to invest in long-term assets. And so now that we know about the time value of money, we can go ahead and think about long-lived assets and how to determine whether they're going to be worth it for us to do. And so this module really is 2 chapters in one. It's chapter 9 and chapter 10. And what I want to do first is kind of go through an overview of the contents of those 2 chapters and how they go together. I mean, I understand that a textbook company needs to break material somehow, right? And so what they did was they made one chapter about sort of analytic models for how to assess an investment, how to determine the worthwhileness of an investment, a capital investment, and then the second portion of that is, well, okay, but what are the numbers we actually use, right? So if you think back to the beginning of the book, all the way back to the beginning of the book in chapter 2, when we talked about cash flows and the challenge of figuring out what the cash flows were, I remember I had a lot of questions about that, right? Well, now here in chapter 10 is when we really start getting into the details of why we focus on cash flows and what that implies, right? So this unit has a fair amount of material in it. We're going to look at, first of all, the difference between the short term and the long term, and then we are going to just briefly skim over this idea of payback. I don't know why they include it in textbooks, because it is not used. It is unsophisticated and amateurish. And then we will go into the details of the net present value and the IRR methods for evaluating investments. And then we're going to kind of skip down to chapter 10 and talk about estimating cash flows, which is not as simple as it sounds. And in particular, we're going to look at, why we care about cash flow, which was addressed at the beginning in chapter 2. We are going to look at figuring out our cash flows. We are going to look at the effects of depreciation on capital investment decisions. And we're going to briefly kind of touch on the question of disposing of capital equipment. But again, this is probably more detail than you actually need right now. And then we're going to, just apply this material in a number of quantitative homework problems. The other thing I want to note is that your concept homework is big, right? Because this material is a lot to get your head around, and I need you to understand it, right? Because of the beauty of spreadsheets, the calculations aren't that bad, right? You just throw the stuff into a spreadsheet, and as long as you understand how to invoke the right formulas, that's no big deal. But it is a big deal to understand what this stuff is all about, right? So that's where we're going in this module. I will stop the recording now and head on into it.